Here we go. Good morning, everyone, or good evening. It depends on when this gets posted. We're so fortunate and grateful to be here today with Oli Jacobs, the author of Wrath of the Land. And this was a trip of a story. I didn't know what to expect when I got into it, but I'm so grateful to have just had an opportunity to read it. Like, it was such a great book to get lost in, and I felt like the pacing was fast, but it was so easy to follow along, and such an absurd kind of theme that was and plot that was unraveling in front of us. We couldn't help but feel both bad for the protagonist and at the same time kind of just see, like, I don't know, like, I love the protagonist, but I also I get why he's the way that he is, and I think that's what makes the story so great for me, at least. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, and honestly, hats off to you. We love the story.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be. Gosh, I sound like I'm accepting an award at the moment. But no, it really is. It's an honor to have obviously been given this opportunity to be part of your paper quest, and also just having people enjoy the book. Really, that's all you ask for as an author. So yeah,
absolutely. From one author to another, man. It's the whole reason that I got involved in this thing with YPQ was because it was a way to give people what an author really wants the most, like especially an indie author. You trade sky and earth just to have people talk about your book, like read it to the point of appreciating it enough to talk about it, to talk about the ideas in it and stuff like that. And God, this had a lot of really weird ideas in it that I want to talk about.
Yeah, that seems to be a trend towards people who read my work. They kind of they go into it kind of thinking, it's just going to be a standard, horror story, and then I think after about a quarter of the book, they just turn to me and go, "What on earth were you thinking?" And then I just, I just kind of go,
But I think that's part of the beauty of all of this, and with what we're doing. And thanks, Steve, for saying that, because the whole idea is, unfortunately, a story like Wrath of the Land might not have gotten the same kind of what's the word? Kind of exposure and much of a chance if it took the more traditional route, because it doesn't necessarily fit within those molds that traditional publishing takes. So it's been really nice to get to explore all these different themes and all these different quirkinesses, as it were. Especially just like, I'm looking at the cover here and I'm just like like that 15 seconds of putting the cover in the front, I'm looking with Steve earlier, is going to get us demonetized. But that's part of the beauty, and that's part of the what's the word I'm looking for, like part of the joy and the beauty behind it is just we can step into this different realm, and we can actually take appreciation for things that might not have otherwise gotten a fair chance.
I mean, I should just quickly clarify about the cover, which was amazing work as always by a Canadian graphic novelist called Elaine M. Will. It's supposed to be the outer casing of a layer of fat and residue, and then like a fleshy thing underneath. I have been told, however, by several people that it looks like something else, which I won't comment on now. I'm sure your viewers will have their own conclusions. But to clarify again, it's a hole that's been chipped in or melted away from a massive ball of fat and to a fleshy thing underneath. Any resemblance to anything else is purely coincidental. But no, as you were saying, I very much doubt Wrath of the Land would have been picked up by anybody, really. It's so, I mean, all my work is one of the freedoms you have as an indie author that I found with all my work is you can be as out there and as unique as you want with not just how you tell the story, but how it's presented, what happens in it, the general themes, the general narrative. I mean, you mentioned obviously the protagonist at the beginning. There's actually two protagonists in this story, so the point of view actually switches back and forth. And then nearer the end of the book, not to say any spoilers, but obviously once again you switch to another viewpoint. So I mean, obviously there's a lot of popular books which do the multi-viewpoint thing, but as a relatively unknown author, you would probably get told, either stick with this person or stick with that person. You can't have both. But obviously both points of view are important to the story in my view.
Yeah, I was gonna say both points of view offered entirely different perspectives, and it was really nice to see kind of the administrative end. And I felt like the administrative end was what we could all really identify with, because we've all experienced the government, and and it's nice to try to get other, or like, yeah, it's just nice to get other opinions about that and really hone in on that feeling. But how was it as an author writing the two different perspectives? Did you find that one was easier to write than the other?
I think probably Laura's perspective, who she kind of represents the more everyday point of view with the story, like the people on the ground who I was trying to think of because obviously Ronald Pyle's part of the story is the bureaucratic, which is obviously I think the way I put it was the more pragmatic approach to the scenario of finding this fat-berg and then unusual stuff happening. Whereas Laura kind of represents not the emotional, but kind of like the immediate human approach to it. So then, her response to the end of the world as a student is to get drunk with her friend, and then just kind of watch the anarchy unfold, and as a kind of detached thing. It's hard to say which one I preferred writing, though. Obviously, drawing upon my experiences as a student, and getting drunk a lot was very easy. But working in local government did inspire some of the Ronald chapters, definitely.
I found when I looked back at my notes before this interview, I had written that it was the bureaucracy of the apocalypse that I found the most horrifying. How absolutely mundane it was. Everyone just keeps doing what they're doing until things just kind of gradually, senselessly fall apart. I really loved the pace that it happened with, though. Like, you were watching a slow decline suddenly accelerate.
Yeah,
I really loved it. I thought the bureaucracy gave it a kind of slight thick of it, which I've spoken about in 2 consecutive interviews now. But it's a great series, and a great series. Yeah. So tell me, especially with the comedy of it, tell me about some of the influences and stuff that went into it.
Well, you mentioned the thick of it. That was definitely an inspiration towards a more bureaucratic side, and I think especially in modern day, the general political works of like Armando Iannucci, even going back to like Brass Eye, Day to Day, that sort of humor where it is just the complete. I'm trying to think of the best word for it. It's not robotic, but it's kind of, you're looking at the bottom line, as it were. You're not looking at the human factor. You're looking like, well, how can this benefit us? How can that really kind of detached from, like I say, that detached from emotion, just kind of. And again, like I say, working in local government, I saw that type of thing where inane decisions were made for the good of some greater goal that had, like I say, no bearing on people, but more bearing on, well, how does this affect us? And what's the worst case scenario, and how can we make it better, and stuff like that. I mean, you have one of the things that the government does in the book is obviously they have percentiles to work out when the world will end, and that sort of mentality is very common. Like I say, you see it in political comedies where it's kind of like, well, if 4 million people die, that's bad. But it's better than if 60 million people were dying. We thought of that. So we kind of consider, that just, it's almost kind of like a horror in itself. Just this complete removal of anything that's this complete detach of emotion, I think. But definitely, I think modern political comedy is brilliantly nihilistic in that sense. So it kind of brings the horror and comedy to it anyway. I mean, I've just read my work is not yet done by Thomas Ligotti, which is the most nihilistic corporate thing I've ever read. But it does it perfectly. This whole idea that the higher up you go, the less they care about anybody or anything other than the bottom line. And the bottom line in this case is humanity. And it's like, this is bad, but it could be worse.
I wanted to ask about people like Ligotti. Lovecraft is a really obvious one, I think. Less so in the style, more in the cosmic nature of the threat. I guess we can go into spoilers now. This is longer than...
I didn't know whether we could or not. That's why I've been kind of holding back. I'm like, right, I'm not gonna mention the tentacles. If I do, that's gonna kind of like, what?
It's one of those things.
It's been a very.
If you're gonna watch the interview, you might as well have read the book to start. This is.
Yeah, that's our philosophy. Go read the book if you haven't. Wrath of the Land is fantastic, and quite a quick as well read. Like I tore through it in about 2 days.
Yeah, it was a fast read, which was nice.
But yeah, I mean, Ligotti is an influence. Lovecraft obviously is. I mean, Lovecraft is one of my primary influences in all my work. I mean, the idea of this, almost like this, the cosmic horror mythos, or the Cthulhu mythos, is just so fascinating to me. More than your general kind of like vampires and werewolves and that sort of thing, which I feel are very kind of like very normal horrors, if that makes sense. Whereas cosmic horrors represent, the joke about it is, it's like, oh, it's unknown and unknowable, so you can't really describe it, which means you don't have to, which means you can write it easy. But for me, it's born out of like just the general terror and nihilism and this is where Ligotti comes in, the general nihilism of existence. So to introduce these beings, for lack of a better term, who are beyond like what we call good and evil or any sort of emotion, and to introduce them in fairly mundane scenarios. So with Wilthaven, one of my other books, you just had just a small town with deep down there, it's a hole. With Wrath of the Land, it starts with a fat-berg. And again, you start off with these little small inconveniences to life, and then just kind of go, there's kind of more to it than you will ever understand, and here's the horror, and be scared. But then you don't have to kind of describe it as much. Throw in the odd tentacle, and most horror fans are happy.
I wrote in my notes that I needed to hand you an award for using the word fanny about in a cosmic horror novel.
Well,
I don't even know if that translates, but it works. I like it.
Well, when you're writing a British horror, I feel you have to put in the odd colloquialism, especially if it fits the character. I mean, Ryan asked earlier about how did I manage to write two very different characters. I can't remember who said the quote, or even if anybody officially said the quote, but the idea that all writers are schizophrenic. So the best writers are like, and so you can get into the two different polarizing mindsets of like kind of like drunken student and very uptight council worker. And this is one of those points where I can't actually remember what I was saying, and I've kind of
Well, I was going to tell you one of the things that I wrote in my notes, which follows on from what you were saying.
okay.
I'd written that it felt like I was watching a frog being boiled very slowly. You know that adage of the frog, where if you boil it slowly enough, you turn the heat up slowly enough, the frog notice it's being boiled, that it's dying. And I was almost like screaming at the characters to get out of there to do something. I was like, can you not see that you're in like a Lovecraftian cosmic horror novel? They were just going to the pub, and it's the kind of horror where I can just imagine myself going to the pub during a horrific Lovecraftian apocalypse. They're like, well, it's not so bad. Like the gas is still on.
It's also like it comes to a point where they're like soldiers are coming in, and then there's like that brainwashing element to all of it, and you're seeing like, what was it? It was Ronald. Was it his wife? Like completely sucked into the mindset, the mentality of it, and it's just like Steve said, you're watching this all unfold, and as a reader, you're like, guys, do something, please, for the love of God, do something. but
the funny, I mean, that's another thing I've been told is kind of a theme in my work, is this idea of the cult of personality, where
what was it,
Joey? Sorry,
what was his name? Kevin? Joey? Kevin.
Yes. Oh, Kevin. Yeah, Kevin's the guy who gets really into the conspiracies.
Yeah.
Fat-berg, and Joey's is Laura's friend, who's kind of like a conduit between them, where he's just like, he's just a funny nut job. And as we all know, nut jobs sometimes turn out not to be so hilarious, especially if they're right in their convictions. It's funny because obviously I agree, you know, the whole boiling a frog scenario, although for some reason when you said that, it reminded me, and this will only be remembered by a certain generation, of the hamster in a microwave flash cartoon that you could do, or frog in a blender.
Oh yeah,
back on Newgrounds. Younger people are probably hearing this kind of going, well, no wonder millennials are so messed up if that was the sort of thing they watched.
Man, you've unlocked a core memory there, man.
Yeah.
It was the style of the time, you know. We just it was cartoon, you know, it wasn't actually real. Let's just reassure people before the complaints start coming in. But yeah, this idea, I think we also saw it. I mean, I'm trying to remember when I think I started Wrath of the Land. I mean, I had the idea probably about 8-9 years ago, and filed it away with everything else. But I think it was after we had obviously the pandemic, and we had the political rise of like Boris Johnson in the UK and Donald Trump in the US, where there was this factor in the world, you know, overall, where we were looking at people's actions and just kind of going, what on earth are you doing? And then you kind of dissect that, and you kind of can see the cult of personality, and like I say, the general groupthink, to get slightly Orwellian, that kind of just gets involved with this sort of thing. So really, when you're watching these people just suddenly kind of go, oh, it's the end of the world, what shall I do? I'll have a drink, you know, or like, oh, we could probably worship this giant pillar of twisting tendrils because it seems like a good idea. You know, you could throw in aspects of you know, oh, maybe it's mind control, supernatural stuff, and you know, that's an easy author way out. But I think at one time you did look at stuff like that and kind of thought, well, there's no way, you know, I'm not stupid enough to fall for something like that. And then you kind of see reality and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But no,
the problem is that everyone else is going to fall for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, fortunately enough, we've never been in an end of world situation as of right now. So we've never been in that environment. So we can't say what we would or wouldn't be doing, honestly.
Yeah. I've just realized, like I say, my lighting has gone a bit weird. So
I was about to say, you're getting
it's the sun shifting, and now I've become holier. in some weird way, which is terrifying, if anything. But yeah, like I say, it's the book as a whole is about like getting caught up in a certain way of thinking. You see it with politics as well, with the bureaucracy. Sorry, again, we go back to political comedy, and a lot of that is based around just an absurd way of thinking. That like the phrase that was used during the pandemic, the new normal, and yeah, it's insanity is a wonderful thing to get lost in, I think.
That was a big part of what I loved the most about it, was how gently insane the whole thing felt. It was a very believable descent into madness. It's the kind of descent into madness that you can read about in any number of cults, or anywhere where kind of these funny parts of the human mind can take over and go a bit nuts. But I loved how culty it got. I did get very heavy, like I don't know if you know, like Hellboy, the BPRD and stuff, SCP,
Oh yeah.
Wiki and everything. I'd written a bunch of like just the inspiration and stuff that I seen from it, and I was like, I bet Ollie loves a lot of the same stuff that I do with these. So speaking of which, I wanted to talk to you about the Bureau, because it felt to me like that opened up this link into a larger universe where we could have other stories that kind of suit Wrath of the Land's vibe. So tell me a little bit about like the setting behind the setting, the stuff that's alluded to.
And specifically Grounding Agent March Sunday.
Best
the grounding agents. So way back when I started like coming up with stories and stuff like that, I wanted to I really like the idea of a shared universe. So I know we have that a lot now in media, so specifically the Marvel setting up the cinematic universes, and also like the idea of multiverses. But it was Stephen King actually, and again Lovecraft, who created these worlds that all kind of intertwined, and like either like overtly or covertly there'd be little hints towards the greater thing of it all. And I wanted to do that in a more fantasy element when I first started writing, but then basically I realized I'm not that great at fantasy. I'm much better with horror. And then I got into something called the SCP Foundation, which became like a massive inspiration to me. It's basically a website where it's done, like I say, as like a secret government agency, and there's different files on objects or things that have become supernatural in a sense. The video game Control used it a lot as inspiration as well. And I liked the idea of this, just this agency that kept watch on everything that was going on in terms of like weird stuff. So the first thing I did actually was there was a short story in one of my collections, which one escapes me now. It might have been Suplex Sounds of the 70s, where you're basically following a team going to this other dimension where it's completely white. And they find out why. Looking back, it is a bit derivative of one of the SCP stories, but
I think I know which one.
Sorry?
I think I might know which one. Was that the one where they've got the disc that they put on the mirrors and they go into the other world where there's...
Yep.
Yeah, yep. Boy, yeah.
There's this idea of going in...
the big upper half
the disc that changes color, and then there's different that's the same dimension. I look back on that and I'm just fanboying here, but still the idea of like filing different weird dimensions type thing. I mean, that was my thought, not like objects but dimensions that we kind of discovered. So from that came Wilthaven, which was about like I say, our dimension, as it were, kind of discovering this other one where terrible things had happened. Like there's a rip that kind of ends up sending stuff through. And like I introduced the you mentioned Hellboy, the BPRD. I introduced the BPD, which was I created that and I was like, oh, that's a great acronym. And then I'm kind of like, oh, it isn't. Crap. But it stands for the Bureau of Paranormal Discoveries or Dimensions. The name kind of changes, and I usually put that down to dimensional rifts, let's say. He says, scrambling for an excuse. But from there, like I say, the idea of this like multi-dimensional agency which kind of tracks and monitors all these weird things that happen. So yeah, in Wilthaven you had the BPD, and there's another one that appears at the end, the name I can't remember. But then I was like, that's going to be my linking device. That's going to be like my chain to create this whole universe, but not in an obvious way. So you in deep down there, you have these mysterious men in like people show up, and funnily enough, there's a grounding agent in that as well. And Wrath of the Land, obviously, the Bureau turn up and start working. And again, grounding agent March Sunday pops up. And the idea with the grounding agent, because I was like, okay, you're going to have all these different realities where you're going to have all these different organizations. You need somebody to be a constant, and that's what the grounding agents are. So as a bit of an explanation, I don't think it's much of a spoiler, but obviously they're described in the book as kind of almost androgynous, but almost like headache inducing, where they're a shimmer. They're like a glitch in reality. And that literally comes from the idea that they're in every reality at the same time. So there's no concrete form to them because there's something different in each reality. So they're just a constant weird outline thing. But yeah, I mean, it's like I say, it's something I kind of want to do because it kind of connects everything and it just feels neater. And it has ended up with me having to now craft a whole pantheon of cosmic horrors for the future. So I think last time I checked, I had done a flow chart starting from the very top that's now branched off into dozens and dozens of gods. To quote one of my friends, does that mean you're going to have the god of melted cheese on wholemeal bread? And I kind of went, probably some stage, maybe.
It's an option.
I can't wait for the book though. If we're getting like a roasted cheese themed cosmic horror, I'm here for it, man.
I mean, it's a challenge to do a whole book on it, and unfortunately, given the way my mind is, it's a challenge I might actually accept, which is very hurtful towards the dozens of other stories I've got planned. But the god of melted cheese may turn up then, just for you,
my man. In our last couple of interviews, Ryan and I have waited until we've got about a minute left to start getting people to tell us really important information about like what they're working on, where's best to find them, where to keep an eye on their work and stuff. So since we've got about 6.5 minutes left, I thought it would be a good time to throw that in. So tell us where we can find you, Oli, and what you're working on.
Yeah, I did kind of mention the count. I did kind of see the countdown timer there. So as I was rambling, I was like, wrap it up. So, I mean, I'm an indie author. I don't have a huge presence on like shelves and that, but I'm mainly on Amazon. And also I work with an indie bookshop or indie online bookshop called the Big Green Bookshop. Used to be a place in Wood Green. They've now changed it to online only. So I think their website is just biggreenbookshop.com, but it's easy to find. But yeah, I'm on Amazon. I am on Twitter, but not on Twitter because X.
Look over your shoulder.
I love how everybody basically looks at it as kind of like nobody calls it X. It's either X, formerly known as Twitter, or Twitter, otherwise known as X. It's like it's a terrible place that will hopefully die a slow death. But I'm on Instagram as Oli JBA. That's OLIJBA. I think I'm on Threads with the same name. Maybe Blue Sky as well. I can't remember. I have a website which I believe this is how prepared I am, by the way, that I now have to just grab my phone and be kind of like, what the hell is where the hell do I do stuff? Yeah, it's my website.
We'll put links to everything in the description.
Yeah, so website is olijbooks.wordpress.com because I'm cheap and don't want to buy a domain name. But more importantly, what I'm working on next is I recently released a collection of short stories called Sertraline Dreams, which has been, first couple of reviews have been good. So if you like giant eggs and labyrinth houses and trying to remember any of the other stories in there, Digitally Lost Brothers, then that might be something good for you. Oh, and Addictive Spices. I'm starting to work on the release of my next book, which is called Everything is Under Control. So there'll be more details about that soon. And then later this year, possibly, I'm hoping to release the third book in my Mr. Blank series, which is less horror, more punching.
Nice.
But as of right now, I'm working on a multi-generational haunted house story. And I've just written a chapter this morning about flaying a man alive. So that was fun.
A good warm up to this conversation.
Well, it was like, how brutal do I want to make this? And I'm suddenly looking up synonyms of strip, as in like stripped and ribbon, stuff like that. And it's that's about 3/4 of the way done, and God knows when that'll be released. There's 3 other books as well that I've got complete. I've got a lot on, but immediately, like I say, if you like Wrath of the Land, Sertraline Dreams is out now. Everything is Under Control will be out in April. And if my head hasn't exploded, there will be much, much more. But you can keep up to date, obviously, through my socials. And also, I have a newsletter, which I really should update at some stage.
I'm the same.
Subscribe to that. You can subscribe to that on my website.
Amazing. There was one thing about the story I really just wanted to highlight real quick with the last 2 minutes we have. There was one scene where Ronald makes a bomb, and the way you wrote it was it was really funny. I'm trying to find the exact phrasing. I don't know if Steve's got it, but was
this the bit where it basically said, I can't tell you how he did it because...
Yeah, exactly.
As I was writing that, I was like, you can't tell people how to make a bomb. That's probably a bad thing. And to be honest, I didn't really want to research how to make a bomb on the internet.
Yep.
So I just thought, look, the guy works in like effectively gardening in the government, so he probably has access to fertilizers and all that stuff. So I know I've seen some shows where they use that in explosives. So let's just do that. Let's not actually tell people. And because the narration of the whole story, which kind of added to the commentary, which was kind of like based on my, like, say, the author all-knowing eye thing, watching on and just kind of going, look, I know what's happening here. I'm going to tell you, but I'm not going to tell you how to make a bloody bomb. Because
I would just like to say hello to the FBI agents that have just joined us.
Like, wait a minute, long-haired guy with a beard talking about building a bomb. So about half an hour after this is finished, I'll be getting a knock on the door. Grand.
Well, so long as they're not the TV licensing agency, you don't have to let them in.
I don't think letting them in is an option. If they're those type of people looking for hairy men talking and building bombs, I think they just kind of enter anyway. The whole idea of like consent of entry is let's really wrap this up now because
Yeah, I was gonna say we got about
Yeah,
15
on
terrible
seconds
now.
left. We got about 15 seconds. Thank you so much, Ollie. Wrath of the
Alright.
Lands. It's been a pleasure. Take care, everybody, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Have a good one, guys.